boys and girl groups are nothing new. In fact, they're almost the opposite, with each of the last couple decades having at least one chart-topping global phenomenon. But in this more individual internet culture, is this something of the past? Or are we just yet to find the it group of the 2020s? Or are they in fact already here? I think before we begin to discuss this sort of concept, it's important to define our terms and what sets apart boy bands and girl groups from bands or solo artists. And I think there's a pretty clear set of defining characteristics of these sorts of groups. Number one, all the members are pretty young and definitely not already commercially successful. Number two, all of the members are the same gender. Girl group, boy band. Very, very binary. Number three, there's a sort of higher power, a producer, a management group, a record label that artificially creates the group together. It's not just naturally a group of friends that decide to start a band. Number four, it's not just focused on the instruments, it's mainly focused on the vocals with some dance in there as well. And number five, they make pop music rather than any other type of music. So those are the sort of parameters for the groups we're going to talk about today. Could talk about loads of other groups and what they sort of mean, but at least in this context, girl groups, boy bands, that's what we're talking about. So we're going to do a quick quiz because I really want to use the YouTube quiz feature. I don't understand how it works, to be honest, but is Boy Genius a girl group? Yes, no. The answer is no, because they were all already successful when they made it. Like, they're literally like a super group. That does not count. Okay, One Direction? Yes, boy band pretty easily falls into all of our categories and one of our main examples for today. Finally, the Beatles. In this case, I'm gonna say no. You could say yes, but personally, I'm not gonna classify them as this sort of boy band because of a lack of like vocals and dancing. They all can play instruments, which is obviously what you want from a band, but not a boy band, at least in this case. So those are the groups we're talking about. I feel like you get the vibes. So we're gonna move on. Okay, now we've established our terms, we're gonna dive into it. So starting with the height of these groups from the late 80s to sort of late 2010s pretty much. And it all started with New Kids on the Block. Now, New Kids on the Block was formed in 1984 by producer Maurice Starr after he was fired by New Edition, an R&B group he was working for. And Starr took 5 extremely young school friends and sort of recruited some extra people in there. So it wasn't just a natural group that sort of formed by itself. It was definitely orchestrated. And they began rehearsing after school because of how young they were, and at weekends, just whenever they had spare time pretty much, until in 1986 they released their first album titled New Kids on the Block and went on tour. Now, this album didn't do great, I can't lie. No one really paid any attention to this really small group. It kind of just happened, and their first tour happened, but they got a second chance. And by the time they started making their second album, the boys were already dissatisfied with the direction that they were being steered in. They wanted to sort of get away from the purely like bubblegum kind of vibes that they had before and start to take control of their own image a bit. And this is something we see a lot throughout boy bands and girl groups, is people get sick quickly of being fully controlled with no artistic input themselves. And so yeah, they began to take more creative control. And in 1988 they began to be noticed with their song Please Don't Go Girl, which ended up number 10 on the Billboard Top 100. Pretty quickly after, the group went on tour as an opener for Tiffany, and then after that they got noticed by MTV, and then they even did a second tour where they were going to open for Tiffany again, but they had to swap the acts round because of how popular they'd gotten, which would be crazy. Like, imagine you're scheduled to be the main act and then your opener overtakes you. Like, that's kind of awkward. And from then on, New Kids on the Block were a solidified part of pop memory until the band disbanded in 1994, but they did actually come together again in 2007, had a bit of a reunion, released an album, did a tour. It was all chill. And New Kids on the Block might have been the start, but they certainly weren't the end. It quickly led to the creation of more groups. Pretty quickly afterwards, they were followed by Take That in 1990, the Backstreet Boys in 93, and NSYNC in 95. But amongst all these groups, you know what was missing? Some girls. And that is where the best-selling girl group of all time come in. The Spice Girls. Spice Girls were created in 1994 by Heart Management, who put together Scary, Sporty, Posh, Ginger and Baby through a series of auditions, trying to create a girl group to finally rival the sea of boy groups. And after they found their 5 girls, Heart then started the girls on a training program, pretty similar to K-pop boot camps these days, with all of them living together in a house, doing dance, singing, and starting to work on their demos. Now, the demos were pretty well received within the industry, and so the girls were like, okay, great, time to start getting things done. But then pretty quickly, 18 months had passed. None of them had signed a contract yet, with the idea that them not having signed a contract would keep them hungrier, keep them working harder. But at this point, they were getting kind of fed up. They hadn't signed a contract, they weren't really getting paid, they were just sort of, they got some money, but you know, it wasn't a lot, and they were just waiting to release their first single. So they decided to leave their management. Jerry Harrod Lewell physically stole the literal like physical copy of one of their demos, and they went to Virgin Records, who allowed them to sort of still be a little bit creatively in control, and hired Simon Fuller as their manager. And then pretty quickly after, in 1996, they released their first single, Wannabe. Might have heard of it. And well, the rest is history. And the group craze definitely didn't stop there. It carried on well into the 2010s with One Direction, Little Mix, and countless others. But what made these groups so popular? Why did we suddenly shift from having bands to sort of having artificially engineered groups? Well, a lot of it comes back to one of the points in our definitions. Boy bands and girl groups were providing a show. They weren't just providing you with a song, they did dance, vocals, you know, they had a whole show going on. And also, their main audience was teens, and the existence of multiple group members made the PR more interesting. The audience could pick their favourites, kind of like a K-pop bias now, and each member was sort of given a really distinct character to play. Think Spice Girls, you've got Sporty, you've got Baby, you've got Ginger. 3 very different personalities, and it was the same in all of the groups, let's be honest. Each member was given their distinct personality so that fans could pick their favourites, pick the people they didn't like as much, pick the one they related to the most. It was all part of the marketing. I recently went to an exhibition called Holy Pop in Somerset House in London. It was so good, oh my god. I've never really been to an exhibition like it before, but it sort of showed a load of different, almost like shrines to different artists, and it was the sort of individually collected memorabilia from different people who obviously were huge fans of these people, sort of almost worshipped them, collected all of their different merch, went to all of their shows, got photos of them. It was really interesting to see the sort of extent to which these people obviously cared about those artists, and it almost felt like a very personal thing to see these people's collections of all of the items that they'd collected. And I also really loved the piece in the middle of the room, which was a fridge decorated with different little pieces of artwork stuck onto it, and I think it sort of really reflected how your physical spaces can mirror your personality and obviously your interests, and it was just a really interesting angle to sort of see things from, because I feel like fandom culture is often overlooked in sort of mainstream modern art, but is often a big, like, more accessible part of it. that makes sense. Anyway, I'm waffling. So that was a great exhibition. Would recommend. I don't know if it's still on, I will check. Anyway, I think these groups do lend themselves towards this kind of fandom more than solo artists might. If nothing else, they have more merch of different designs to collect. It can become a collecting thing. There can be like trading cards with different members on, or even just like different variations of the merch for each member. Huge collector's thing. And I think that just allows fans to participate in a much larger way and sort of get more involved, which is just a cycle which continues until people are really invested in these groups. And also having a whole group sort of advertised as being best friends, even if that's not always the case, furthers this relatability to their audience of predominantly teens who are probably spending a lot of time with their friend groups, let's face it. Now, these groups may be marketed as best friends who just love making music together, but what happens when this illusion begins to shatter? It's no secret that most of these groups were overworked, underpaid, and had very little control over their own lives, let alone the direction of their music. One Direction actually outlasted most of the other groups with their 5-year run, and yet in these 5 years they released 4 albums and went on 5 tours, so it's safe to say they were busy. And you know, Little Mix even went as far as to say they had to book in slots to wash their hair because they just didn't have enough time in the day. And let's face it, not much has changed in the world of K-pop. Long days and, you know, very packed training schedules are pretty common practice even before the groups debuted, let alone after. So it's sort of unsurprising that these groups often don't last very long. And another big problem these groups faced is members wanting to do their own thing. Members of these groups often saw the groups as a sort of way to begin their careers, not something they wanted to be attached to forever. And so lots of members wanted to leave their group to work on their own solo projects, because why wouldn't you if you've already got the audience? Just think about what Harry Styles has been able to do once leaving One Direction. Not that he's the one who chose to leave, but you know. And yeah, this is a story that's been told over and over again, with solo artists simply doing their own thing after the group. Think Harry Styles to Jennie from Blackpink to Geri Halliwell from Spice Girls. But in the case of the Spice Girls, things were a little different, and it probably wasn't the only reason she left. Okay, I'm sure you've heard of the real reason that the Spice Girls broke up, but in case you haven't, here's a quick rundown. Geri, Ginger Spice, left the group very abruptly. Literally, like, she got off the plane to one of their shows, left, was like, I'll see you later girls, and did not turn up to the show. Like, did not warn anyone in advance. Very abrupt. No one expected it. They were in the middle of a tour. That was in 1998, by the way. And in the last couple of years, the theory that the Spice Girls broke up because Mel B and Geri broke up has skyrocketed in popularity. And while it hasn't been confirmed by either of them, Mel B did say in an interview that she slept with Geri.
Were, you know, more than just good friends. Did you sleep with Geri like that? Yes, really?
She's gonna hate me for this because she's all posh in a country house with her husband.
Just saying. But Geri denies it. So that's what the situation is. And whether it's true or not, I do think it's a great example of another big problem that's kind of simultaneously timeless and a modern problem. And that is shipping. And while shipping's nothing new, see John Lennon missigning his name as John McCartney while drunk. Anyway, the rise of the internet has definitely increased the amount of shipping, or at least the extent to which the artist is aware of shipping. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Larry, but in case you haven't been online in the past 15 years, Larry Stylinson is the ship name for Louis Tomlinson and Harry Styles, both members of One Direction. And let's just say the theory that these two were or are secretly dating was, and to an extent still is, everywhere. This was harmless at first, but like many other pairs who have been shipped, it quickly took over the actual work that they were trying to do, and lots of the fans became more focused on this than the actual band and their music, with all of their interactions being analysed for proof and so on, so on. And the Spice Girls and Larry are just two of countless examples of shipping in this industry. And I think that the rise in shipping and just social media in general has meant that management is often a lot more cautious on how their group members are presented, which means they can often feel a lot more controlled, even more so than they were before, and the dynamic between members of the group is just less engaging, and they don't sort of have that natural chemistry with each other that many of the earlier groups had. So what now? Well, I think in conclusion, the thing with Western audiences is each of these groups, although they all had very, very similar constructions, similar methodology, they were all almost a one-off by that management company. Unlike in K-pop, where you have big names like HYBE manufacturing group after group after group, these were all sort of one-hit wonders, group-wise. Not that the groups themselves only had one song. And so I think that despite Simon Cowell's best efforts to create December 10, the new One Direction, a Western audience, I don't think has the interest in these completely artificially created groups. And I think that is where HYBE is going wrong, trying to create the global girl group KATSEYE. And I think although a lot of K-pop influences have become more global, think BTS, Blackpink, like so popular, and obviously K-pop as a genre is growing in popularity, using the sort of K-pop method to try and create the global girl group with KATSEYE has failed for a number of reasons. One, because their songs just aren't that good. It's like, no, I don't think that's a controversial opinion, to be honest. And two, because I think the sort of Western appetite for these fully controlled, orchestrated groups just isn't there. And in order to gain interest, you almost need to present it as an accident. Like all of these girl groups, boy bands, sort of lent into that. We're just best friends who love making music together. One Direction didn't even win X Factor. Like they were so loved by the fans that it became a group. And I think that is what's missing in these new groups. Because does anyone actually care about December 10? No. The record sales, like, I was looking at record sales. The Spice Girls have like 100 million. Little Mix have like 60 million. And then December 10 have like 13,000. And I know obviously they're like not a big group, and they've only got one EP, but still, like, I just don't think anyone cares, to be honest. And so yeah, I think where we're at currently is, I don't want to say the death of the group, but I think things need to change in order to make us interested in them again. Like, we've been there, we've done that, we've had the Spice Girls, we've had One Direction. We don't need the exact same thing again. So that's what I think. Let me know if you agree. I know there's a lot more to say about K-pop and the sort of way that that influences this, but that's not this video. So yeah, go watch a different one. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe, because oh my god, this was so stressful to, it wasn't stressful to make, but this is my script and I lost it about 5 times. I have like 10 pieces of paper and I lost them about 5 times before filming this. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Subscribe and I will see you soon. Bye. I'm doing a collab for my next video. It's very exciting. Very exciting. Bye.